Everyone has the chance to get more out of their brain, and the question is, how? The key is in a part of the brain called the cerebellum. What's the cerebellum? Well, it's the bit of the brain at the back that creates skills, like apps on your smartphone, to make everything we do easy, consistent and effortless, whether it's learning to walk, to run, read, write, ride a bike, drive a car, socialise, or even play sport. If we can't do any of them, well, it's because the cerebellum hasn't yet created an app for it. If we can do them, but not very well, it's because the cerebellum hasn't properly finished the app. And if we can do them effortlessly, then the cerebellum has finished its job properly. Generally though, even as adults, we are very good at some things, but we're not a natural at others. Some people, for instance, doesn't matter how hard they try, they're never a natural at reading, whilst others find it effortless. The cerebellum is the reason for that, and why some can't concentrate, or be excellent at sport, or make friends, and so on. It's the master junction box in the brain that links the brain and our bodies with special circuits it's created that we call skills. Or if we can't do them, of course, then we call them limitations. And in some cases, they're severe enough to be learning difficulties. Doesn't it make you wonder just how much easier life could be if we could develop the cerebellum more, so that those really useful skills we lack could develop naturally? Well, researchers in the last few years have worked out how to do just that. Let's look at what they've learnt. When animals are born, they start walking and feeding in minutes. Within a couple of hours, they're running about. They're born with the skills that human babies don't develop for a couple of years or more. Animals at birth have a highly developed cerebellum with lots of apps already created. And in humans, the cerebellum hasn't developed in the same way. It's got it all to do. It can't walk or talk or do hardly anything. So it's at about 12 months that a baby is just starting to walk clumsily. The app for walking is even then only partly finished, and it takes a good while before they're walking confidently and safely. In other words, before the cerebellum has properly finished the walking app. It's also then developing another app for speaking, and another for recognizing when mum is happy and when she's not happy with me, and thousands of other apps to make life as we know it happen. Later on, it'll develop an app for controlling your eyes and other skills needed so you can read and write. All of these apps are intended to make it easy to do quite difficult things without having to think about them. But before the app is finished properly, you have to think about what you're trying to do. And when it is finished, you do the same things perfectly without any thinking. But in most people, the cerebellum has left a few apps unfinished. Sometimes they're not too important things. Not everyone is a brilliant violinist, for instance, but some skills are really important to everyone, like reading. So we want to sort them out. And the next big question is, can we force the cerebellum to finish its jobs properly? Well, that's a good question. Well, this is how it can happen. Have you noticed how children are always happier on fairground rides when they're jumping and rolling around? Well, that's because the brain is happiest when there's a lot more movement than usual. Movement stimulates the balance organ behind the ear, and this stimulation goes to the cerebellum, powers it up, gets it excited. Some say it readies the brain for learning by creating plasticity. So that's a great start. The cerebellum is eager to learn. The next thing is what to get it to learn. The obvious thing is something it doesn't already know, so it becomes a challenge to learn it. You find something that it doesn't find easy and you challenge it while it's excited about learning. Well, that's the secret, combining those two things together at the same time. And when you do, the brain gets cleverer because the cerebellum is getting stronger, more able, and gets better at making new apps, and in fact more likely to finish off the ones that it didn't finish properly before. And you ask, is that really how it happens? Yeah, it is. Babies learn fast when they're rolling around and crawling. Scurrying about like they do is exciting their balance organ, priming their cerebellum, and then they're at the same time trying to do all sorts of new things, new challenges, and they are developing naturally. If you want to develop naturally when you are older, you realize you're not doing so much crawling and climbing and jumping, and you're not trying out new things that you've never done before. So the development slows right down. And if the cerebellum has not finished some vital apps off, like the one you need to read and write easily, for instance, you're stuck. That skill has hit a glass ceiling. You've got to find a way to kick-start it so that important app gets finished off. Well, here's how we do that. Remember, to start with, we must stimulate the vestibular, the balance organ, and we must challenge the cerebellum at the same time. So we've had our experts try out hundreds of thousands of combinations of different types of exercise to achieve exactly this. And they measure what happens, and they find out which combinations get the cerebellum working best so it can finish off those vital apps you want to use. When we're doing this, scans of the brain show that these exercises increase the blood flow in the cerebellum, and that's a great start. Researchers also then show the number of brain cells increase so that the grey matter, as they call it, it gets more dense. And then that wonderful scientific journal Nature says that the combination of these two types of exercises multiplies the stem cells in the cerebellum. That's awesome, because stem cells are the natural building blocks, and we're creating them right there in the brain's most important junction box. Nature also says that if you keep this up for several weeks, those stem cells become new circuits or new connections. So we do exactly that. The program we have only takes 10 minutes twice a day, and it gives the optimum combination of exercises to get the brain ready to learn and properly challenged, and then every day we adjust the exercises to keep the development going, to hunt out and find as much potential as possible. Is it the same program for everybody? Absolutely not. Obviously, a 7-year-old child is going to need very different exercises to a 27-year-old elite athlete, or an 87-year-old lady. In fact, every brain is completely different anyway, so needs very different combinations of exercises. As a result, every program has to be unique to perfectly suit and optimize every brain. How long does this all take? Well, for most people it's 10 minutes twice a day for up to a year. And do the results last? Well, think about this. When you learn to ride a bike, it's the cerebellum that's created an app for that. The wonderful thing about these apps is that you can put away your bike for 20 years or more, but when you do get on one again, the cerebellum still has the app and it still works. So yes, it seems the results are lasting. Did that make some sense to you? Well, if you've got some unfinished apps, you now know what you can do to get them finished off naturally and reveal your hidden potential.